This is a case study of the attempt by the Hudson's Bay Company to establish a sales shop at Chapleau, Ontario, in anticipation of the new Canadian Pacific Railway completed in 1885. It incorporates research conducted by myself, Ian Macdonald, and my Ottawa collaborator, Michael McMullen. This is Rupert's land. The town of Chapleau is on the southern edge of the Hudson's Bay watershed known as the Ontario Height of Land, approximately 300 miles due south of Moose Factory on James Bay and 600 miles west of Montreal. This slide shows the Canadian Pacific Railway as the red dotted line relative to the Moose River tributaries shown in blue. The CPR was built along the Height of Land shown in green between Sudbury and White River. Completion of the CPR in 1885 quickly rendered all the former trading posts on the Moose tributaries obsolete, as the railway, rather than the rivers, became the major route for shipping furs and supplies. New Hudson's Bay Company posts were located along the line, accommodating their traditional fur trade plus new commercial retail activity. Fort Lacloche, the former headquarters of the Lake Huron district, was relocated to Sudbury. Mishpecotton House, the former headquarters of the Mishpecotton district, was relocated to Chapleau. This is an 1884 diagram of the original CPR 1 mile square Chapleau town site. The community had a population of 628 in 1890, including 30 Indigenous families. Chapleau had nothing to do with the fur trade. It is a railway divisional point located 5 subdivisions from Montreal at the headwaters of the Kapuskasing River system, or the Kapuskasing River. This river runs east-west along the north side of the community and eventually flows into the Kapuskasing River at Kapuskasing Lake, 50 miles to the north. The Napsquashi River runs north-south and was the canoe route from which you eventually can portage into the Montreal River and Lake Superior. The Kapuskasing River system was never a major supply route for either the Northwest Company or the Hudson's Bay Company. It is a very challenging canoe route, full of weeds, waterfalls, rapids, and an endless number of difficult portages. These are the Hudson's Bay Company properties in Chapleau. A small subpost was built in the fall of 1884, approximately a mile from the commercial center of the new village on the east side of the Napsquashi River. This is the sales shop, built at the corner of Birch and Yonge Streets in 1886. This was the 2-story house built at the west end of Pine Street for the post factor. The map on the left describes the buildings completed on the town site in 1886. The image on the upper right is the CPR marshalling yard looking south and east. The new roundhouse and fueling facilities are to the left. The water tower and car maintenance shops are in the center. And the new rail depot, opened in 1886, is to the right. Peter Bell is an important figure in the history of the region. He was 55 years old when he arrived in Chapleau in 1884 from his previous 20-year stint as chief trader of the Mishpecotton district to establish a subpost and sales shop for the Hudson's Bay Company in Chapleau. He was with the company at that time for 34 years and was a commissioned officer of the Hudson's Bay Company. He was brought up in the fur trade and had no previous experience conducting business in a competitive commercial retail market, and it was a difficult stage of life to be establishing an entirely new and unfamiliar business endeavor. The well-known photograph on the right of the slide is the 1887 Winnipeg meeting of the Hudson's Bay Company commissioned officers. Bell appears in the center of the image. It would have been interesting to be privy to discussions at this meeting. The economy was depressed, the price of furs was declining, along with the value of company shares, and the future of the company was uncertain. The Hudson's Bay Company had two major competitors in Chapleau. The competitor immediately across Birch Street was Murray's and Mulligan, and diagonally across the street was T.A. Austin and Company. Both of these competitors were experienced merchants. The Murray brothers had operated general stores in the Ottawa Valley since the 1860s and were suppliers of goods and services to the CPR and before that to the Canada Central Railway. They were also major buyers of furs on both sides of the Ottawa River. This is the first Austin store in Chapleau, built in 1886. This is the second Austin store, built in the 1890s, located at the northeast corner of Birch Street and Yonge Street. The image was taken after Austin had gone into the lumber business and sold the business to the partnership of Beamish and Smith. The second Austin store illustrates some of the basic principles of commercial retail. Establish your presence in a prominent and attractive manner. Showcase your merchandise in a highly visible and effective manner as possible. The objective is to entice potential customers into the store to purchase not only what they need, but also what they might not need. This is the principle of impulse buying. Austin invested heavily in his storefront to achieve this, while Peter Bell at the Hudson's Bay Company across the street was struggling to have the company authorize a coat of paint for the sales shop. This slide is the interior of the Murray's and Mulligan store, which illustrate the various ways that merchandise was displayed. All transactions were carried out over the counter. Merchandise was displayed in glazed counters, shelves that extended to the ceiling, nooks and crannies, and hung from the ceiling, providing that the ceiling height was high enough to accommodate. This is a closer look at the Hudson's Bay Company sales shop, which causes one to have serious concern about Peter Bell's judgment. The store is of primitive design and poor construction, clearly much smaller than the Murray's and Mulligan store across the street, and for some strange reason, faces the store toward the CPR marshalling yard, with the rear of the building facing Birch Street, where the majority of customers will come from. The plan on the right is a company sketch of the store. The actual space for retail activity is the size of a very small school classroom. The Hudson's Bay Company signature on Birch Street is thus a cluttered storage yard. The sales shops at Biscoe-Tacing and Missinaibi, on the other hand, appear to have been thoughtfully designed and properly sited, and one wonders why a building of that type hadn't been built at Chapleau. This is a larger image of the sub-post built in the fall of 1884, taken by the photographer accompanying the CPR survey team. This is a traditional Hudson's Bay Company post with store, stockade, warehouse, and a dwelling house. Bell initiated the construction of 3 sub-posts at Chapleau, Missinaibi, and Magpie in 1884, which were located on the main canoe routes where it was thought that Indigenous traders could be intercepted before they had a chance to do business with the newly established retail stores in the area. He was confident that there would be a good measure of loyalty to the company. The sub-post enjoyed early success, but Indigenous traders appear to have been a bit more astute than Bell had anticipated, as they soon learned to seek better prices for their furs at the new retail stores in town. The post was eventually closed in 1889 when the company determined that it wasn't worth maintaining. This is an image of the 2 photographs taken by the CPR photographer, which form a panoramic view of the sub-post site, including the Ojibwe settlement that developed beside the sub-post. Mike and I are confident that these were 16 Mishippigotten Ojibwe families from Goats Gap near Mishippigotten who relocated to Chapleau with the Hudson's Bay Company to establish the sub-post. Another group of families from Mishippigotten relocated to Missinaibi to establish the sub-post at that location. These eventually became reserves 61 at Chapleau and 62 at Missinaibi. The Michipicoten district of the Hudson's Bay Company was quite extensive, extending from 20 miles east of Chapleau to Port Arthur on Lake Superior, a distance of close to 400 miles. Prior to the opening of the railway, it was difficult and even impractical for Peter Bell, as chief trader of the Michipicoten district, to personally visit each post. Post managers therefore enjoyed a good measure of independence and autonomy in administering their various posts and subposts. The railway now made it possible for the district manager to easily visit posts, resulting in reduced authorities for post manager, confusion across the board, and increased workload and responsibilities for the district manager. The majority of Bell's staff were young, with little or no experience with competitive retail. One employee, John Spence, was dedicated exclusively to looking after the subpost. No employees had accounting or administrative experience to offset Peter Bell's workload and increased responsibilities with district oversight. The historic inventory of Hudson's Bay Company trading posts was limited to meeting the basic needs and did not provide the wide range of merchandise and fancy goods that Austin and Murray's and Mulligan stocked. It became obvious that the Hudson's Bay Company sales shop was too small, with limited office accommodation. Inspection reports record that stock was not properly kept, and the proximity of the sales shop to the 14 smokestacks of the neighboring CPR roundhouse was proving to be a significant problem. The poor condition of the building was also a matter of record. Reports clearly established that the store was not well managed. Hazardous material like coal and coal oil was stored within the building. Customer circulation was too narrow to properly display goods. There were problems with the CPR delaying delivery of goods and improperly labeled merchandise. Reports also suggested there is great room for improvement in the keeping of stock. The most important concern was that the sales shop was not profitable. Losses were recorded in the previous 4 outfits, from $787 in outfit 1887 to $1,886 in outfit 1990. It became a matter of record that the post may not be worth continuing. Peter Bell was relieved of his responsibilities in early 1889 and replaced by Donald Cameron McTavish from Sudbury, who was highly respected in the company. McTavish was previously chief trader of the Lake Huron district. He had a reputation for closing down unprofitable posts, although there is no official suggestion that he was assigned to Chapleau for that reason. During the time he was at Chapleau, however, he closed the subposts at Chapleau and Magpie and recommended the closure of the sales shops at Missinaibi and White River. One of the posts he shut down while at the Lake Huron district was at Pogamasing Lake, about 50 miles west of Sudbury, managed by Anishinaabe Chief Louis Espanol, who was the first Indigenous post factor in the region, appointed earlier by Donald Smith. The Lake Huron district was experiencing significant decline in trade, and McTavish opted to shut down the Pogamasing Lake post, despite the fact that the post was showing a profit. He subsequently denied Espanol the opportunity to manage the new sales shop at Biscotasing. McTavish was thus clearly on the wrong side of history, in this case at least. Louis Espanol continued to function as a highly visible advocate for Indigenous rights and was a prominent representative in the Treaty 9 negotiations of 1905 and 1906. The 1892 Chapleau inspection report indicated that with one exception, there had been a complete staff turnover during McTavish's tenure as chief trader. One notable addition was James Cowie, a senior accountant from Sudbury, whose presence would allow McTavish to devote considerable time to the other posts in the region. McTavish appears to have dedicated himself entirely to managing the district. The 1892 District Inspection Report and final handwritten report by McTavish made no reference to the Chapleau post at all. The Michipicoten and Lake Huron districts were officially reorganized in the early 1890s. The Michipicoten district was to become the Lake Superior district, and the headquarters changed from Chapleau to Red Rock, which significantly diminished the importance of Chapleau. The more central location of the district headquarters was to supposedly make it more convenient for the district manager to administer the various posts. Much of McTavish's final letter was devoted to praising the performance of the posts at Long Lake and Monte Zambert near White River. These posts were profitable, well managed, and maintained a network of outposts to facilitate access by Indigenous traders, thus preserving the traditional trade and loyalty of the Indigenous traders. At the same time, they developed competitive retail business which lasted until the 1950s and 1960s. The sale shop at Missinaibi, despite having many aggressive competitors, would survive until 1938 as the Hudson's Bay Company wished to preserve trade on the Missinaibi and Moose River. The post also supplied the Indigenous community at the New Brunswick House post at the north end of Lake Missinaibi. Despite a decline in the fur trade and the near extinction of beaver, the post continued to show a profit until 1907. Inspection reports dwell on the disruption to the traditional purchasing system of the Hudson's Bay Company when they enjoyed a monopoly, where fur prices were pegged to the price of a beaver pelt. The influx of new traders willing to make immediate profit made it difficult for post managers to know what the base market price was, resulting in significant variation from post to post. This had the impact of undermining the commitment of Indigenous traders to a particular trading post and encouraged them to move from one post to the other, seeking the highest price. It became difficult to provide purchasing guidelines and limits to various post managers along the line. The actual date when the Hudson's Bay Company ceased operations in Chapleau is not entirely clear in the archives. Mike McMullen, however, discovered an article in the Sudbury Journal of June 6, 1895, describing the departure of a Mr. Frank Norris, a bookkeeper with the Hudson's Bay Company in Chapleau. The account books reveal that all customer accounts had been summarized as of the end of May 1895, which would have been Norris's last task before leaving town. The article also indicated that from that date on, the company would do a strictly cash business. Now, anyone who has ever lived in that part of the country knows that everybody had an account with one or both of the major general stores. It was how you did business. To require a strictly cash policy is to go out of business, which is exactly what they did. The Hudson's Bay Company operated in Chapleau from 1884 to 1895, a period of only 11 years. The Hudson's Bay Company properties were disposed of in 1896. The sales shop was sold to a Mrs. Mary Carr for $1,200, and the house was sold for $800. The Hudson's Bay Company never patented the land where the subpost was located, and the post was abandoned in 1889 and occupied by the Ojibwe settlers. A 220-acre parcel of land, including the land the subpost was built on, was purchased by the Ojibwe band in 1905. The land was occupied until the 1970s, when the new reserve lands were made available to them. Peter Bell was relieved of his responsibilities as chief trader of the Michipicoten district at Chapleau in 1889. He was assigned to Esquimalt Bay District at Rigolette in northern Labrador until 1892. He finished up with the Hudson's Bay Company on furlough until 1895, when he retired first to Kingston and later to Vancouver. The history books have not judged Peter Bell harshly, despite his various miscalculations at Chapleau. There is a railway siding where the Canadian National Railway crosses the Missinaibi River, which is named Peter Bell, honoring his long service to the Hudson's Bay Company at Mississippicotten and his contribution to the region. Donald McTavish served as factor and chief of district at Chapleau from 1890 to 1892. He was transferred to Rupert House in the Rupert's River District, where he remained until 1901 and retired from the company in 1908. We'll end this presentation with a Winnipeg connection. Florence Edith McTavish Rogers, the eldest daughter of Donald McTavish, would become the first woman to be elected to the Manitoba legislature as a Liberal, representing Winnipeg in 1920 and re-elected in 1922 and 1927.